Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'll be building a workbench in my garage as well as shelving above it and below it. Right here you can see I've already gotten my outlets installed. Of course, it's always good to have outlets along your workbench so you can plug tools in. In that video you may have already seen, I marked up the wall already. So in today's video, all I have to do is just build the workbench. Obviously, it's always a good idea to find the studs in the wall and also mark where the bench is going to line up to make installation easier. Along with this, I also added outlets where I think they'll be necessary. So each shelf has an outlet just in case, at some point I want to plug something in. This switched outlet here is going to be for lights because there's going to be a shelf here hanging above the bench. And I thought it would be awesome to have some direct lighting above it so I can, plug in my lights. In terms of lumber, I'm not using anything special. I'm just using 2x3s, which will be plenty strong enough for a workbench. Along with that, I have some sanded plywood and then a bunch of other scrap plywood that I'm going to put to use. All of this is readily available at any home center. In terms of tools and fasteners, I'm just using deck screws. I have some 3.5-inch deck screws left over from my shelving project, some 2-inch deck screws, and then I found these for really cheap 3-inch deck screws. And then a bunch of drill bits, drill and impact driver, and you're gonna need a saw of some sort. My bench is gonna be exactly 8 feet starting from that edge. I know that the first 2x3 is going to end exactly right there because there is an obstruction here. I will have to go around that, and then I'm going to add one little stretch right there, and then the bench will end here. At this point, we can start putting our wood on the wall. I made these 2 spacers. I'm gonna drill a couple holes first. I just want to make sure that this is level, which it is, and then I'm just going to drill and then send screws into each stud. To go around this obstruction, I'm going to cut a piece at 14.5 inches. I'm going to use the same spacers I used before and just drill holes into the studs. Cut one last piece at 14 inches that will connect the two. At this point, the first set of 2x3s is on the wall, as you can see, so it's time to start cutting our horizontal supports. My bench will be 2 feet deep, so I'm going to have to cut 21-inch horizontal supports, and I'm going to have 5 of them spaced at 30 inches each. And then the shelves are going to be 1 foot deep, so they're going to be spaced the same as these, except I'm going to cut them at 9 inches. I've gone ahead and set up this stop, so once you touch this block, it's exactly 21 inches from the blade. At this point, I'm going to start drilling pocket holes. I have my Harbor Freight Drill Master jig. This is a really excellent pocket hole jig, especially for the price. So I'm going to clamp it down, and I'm going to use this hole right here and just send the drill bit in. And that's the last one. At this point, we can start attaching these to the wall. So to attach this, I'm going to use a clamp so that way I can get it nice and flat. Then I'm going to send 2-inch screws into these pocket holes. There it is. The next step now is to lay 2x3s across the front. So this is usually the most difficult part, but because I have clamps, I basically have an extra set of hands. So where these ends line up, they're not going to be perfect. So what I'm going to do is take these blocks of wood that I cut, I'm going to clamp it down on either side, and then I'm going to drive in a bunch of screws on the back. All of my framing is finished, as you can see. It's pretty straight and level. Up here, I decided to plug in these lights. So this is what this switch receptacle is for. So when it's off, obviously the lights turn off. But this will obviously be angled down and hang under this shelf, and will provide nice task lighting for the workbench. At this point, I have some reclaimed plywood I'm going to start putting down on the bottom shelf. You'll see why I have to put this plywood on first. but also I do have to notch out an opening for the conduit. I'm just gonna use a jigsaw to kind of roughly just fits pretty decent. The reason I had to put this plywood in first is so I can now trace the support and cut it through. I'm gonna try and do this with my oscillating multi-tool. I'm gonna put in my supports now, so what I'm going to do is just level this entire thing out and then drive in screws. I've gone ahead and put all the legs on, and at this point I'm just going to put this plywood here so I can stand on this, and then I'm going to start putting plywood on these top shelves first, and then I'm going to apply polyurethane to this bench top. I've got a few pieces of this reclaimed plywood, so I'm going to go ahead and just rip it down in 1 foot sections. At this point I'm just going to notch these out and then start attaching the plywood to these shelves. All the plywood is on, and these shelves are fairly strong. I think they'd hold a decent amount of weight, but to kind of beef them up a little bit, since they don't actually have that much support, what I'm going to do is attach pieces to hold these two shelves together, so they're kind of relying on each other, and that should make them quite a bit stronger. I'm going to do exactly what I did with the legs on the workbench and just notch out a hole and put 2x4s in. I'm gonna pass this through the notch. Before I apply polyurethane, I have to cut one section of this at 2 feet because of course I have one 8-foot section and then I need 2 more to get to 10 feet. Before I apply my polyurethane, I'd like to sand this down just to finish it off. At this point, I'm going to start applying poly. I have a foam brush and a paintbrush. I'll just see whichever one works better. So at this point, I'm going to pry open this can. I'm going to start with this scrap piece of wood. The first coat of polyurethane has been applied. I actually really like the way it kind of brings out the color in the wood, even though it is just a workbench. But primarily this will just protect the wood from, liquid spills and splashes and things like that. I also went ahead and stained the framing itself. I didn't stain the entire part, just the visible parts, because like I said, it does kind of look like a stain. In person, it's a lot more vibrant, but I do like the way it looks. Before I apply the bench top, I'd like to double up this front edge, and the reason I'd like to do that is so I can get a good clamp base. So you can see right now, if I were to clamp something to the top, there's not a whole lot of area for the clamp to bite onto, whereas if I doubled it up like that, there'd be a lot of space for that clamp to grab. At this point, we can go ahead and put our bench top on. I'm going to notch out the conduit holes, so I'm just going to first drill with this spade bit where I think it should be. That's actually really nice. I'd like to install the lights now, so I have these chain links that I undid. What I'm going to do is just screw these up there with these screws and then zip tie these light fixtures into those hooks. All the lights have all been configured. Let's try them out. There they are. You can see I ended up doing some cable management just so all of the wires aren't all over the place. Just plugs into this receptacle right here, but it does hang right over the workbench and it does provide some really nice direct lighting. I have some leftover pegboard I never used, so obviously if I just put this flush on the wall, it would be some pretty useless pegboard because then nothing would be able to hook into those holes. So I have these scrap pieces here, and I'm going to basically just use these as spacers against the wall so that way you can actually hang things on it. Pegboard is installed. I might put a little bit on that side, but for now I'll leave that empty. I applied the fourth and last coat of polyurethane, so now I'm just going to take some 220 grit sandpaper and just lightly sand everything down. you can see, I'm also screwing down the bench top, so I'm just drilling a small pilot hole just to get through the plywood. And then sending these screws in with my impact driver. This project is officially finished. You can see that the polyurethane on the bench top has dried. It actually creates a really nice shiny look, and also it protects the wood and provides a really nice work surface. It almost feels like a hardwood floor, except obviously there's some natural imperfections, but it is really nice. So let's talk about cost. The dimensional lumber was about $45. I did have to buy this sheet of plywood. It cost $42, so around $100 after tax. Along with that, the plywood that I used in this project was reclaimed, so this was given to me by the high school woodshop teacher because they do a lot of projects and they don't usually keep the old wood. The pegboard was free, the lights were free. The electrical stuff did cost money, but I don't really want to factor that into the cost because not everyone has to do that. But pretty much everything else is just reclaimed. Other than that though, I do have to get this thing organized. I already started putting tools on the pegboard, but thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed watching it, and maybe if you want to build this, good luck.